Welcome to the CX Files. I'm Peter Ryan. For many, customer experience is defined in terms of business-to-consumer interactions, but the reality is that the B2B community makes up an important, sizable part of the CX dynamic. The business pressures around customer management in B2B are unique and require a deft hand to ensure the best possible outcomes. Today, the CX Files dives into the world of B2B customer experience management with Helen Hickin, the founder and CEO of Icon Communication Center, which specializes in supporting interactions to the business-to-business space. In our chat, Helen discusses the pressures B2B enterprises face from a CX perspective, what these firms need to look for in a partner, and the right technologies that can drive the best possible outcomes. Helen, a good starting point might be to talk to us a little bit about Icon and what your role in the CX industry is.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So Icon, we specialize in the business-to-business environment, looking at predominantly inside sales and account management space. So customer experience is absolute paramount. And our real understanding that within this space, within the business-to-business space, customer experience, we believe, is very much underserved. It's really our quest to make sure that businesses are fully supported in this respect.
And that's, I think, a really good starting point for the discussion today, because as somebody who's been working as an analyst the past nearly 20 years in the CX space, one of the elements that I've always felt has been underserviced is that B2B element. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about what you see as some of the unique drivers in terms of what's pushing good CX from a B2B environment versus what it might look like from a B2C environment.
Yeah, I mean, from what we can see and my experience over the years is B2C, it's really strange. In a way, B2C customer experience, if you look at it logically, it shouldn't be ahead of B2B. And yet when you look at surveys, you can see that B2C customer experience can be up to like 25% percentage points above the B2C environment. And again, there's no real reason why that should be, because B2B companies have all the opportunity to know more about their customers, but there's just not enough attention paid to the whole customer experience strategy and understanding what we do with the data, what we know about customers, and ultimately how we can make their lives better and how the connection with companies can be improved moving forward. So in summary, we're dealing within the business-to-business space, we're dealing with smaller numbers. Those smaller numbers, though, have a much larger impact on clients compared to the business-to-consumer environment. And yet there's still not enough strategy devoted to this space right now.
So you touched on a lot of things there that I would love to explore over the course of our discussion today. But something that I'm curious about relates to that whole element of B2B and what's going on in regards to the discussion that organizations are having with Icon when they come to the table. What are some of the key pain points that enterprises that have a predominant B2B focus are telling you that's hitting home for them? What are some of the big challenges that they're facing in this atmosphere right now?
Yeah, there's a couple of challenges. So the first one is to persuade organizations to actually outsource that function. And a number of organizations, because a lot of these are complex interactions. So within the B2B space, there's a lot of history. It is way more complex typically than business to consumer. So first of all, we've got to get business to understand you can outsource this. It is going to take some time to implement it, but ultimately it will allow you to step back, not deal with the day-to-day, look at the data, give you more insight, and decide where that's going. So the first, I guess, challenge that we see is getting organizations to understand the benefit of outsourcing. When we've done that, you don't look back. We don't look back, because the experience that we have is, ultimately we're ending up representing clients at trade events. We're working with their marketing departments. We're getting involved in pricing decisions as to what their pricing packages look like. So that's the first obstacle. But the thing that I think before we even get there is organizations within the business to business sector, it's actually defining and getting assigned and signed off a proper budget for customer experience, because it's that return on investment. And customer experience, it's a little bit woolly, and ultimately you've got to get, there's lots of many things, but it's about reducing churn. It's about promotion of that client brand, that net promoter score. And it takes organizations, and we try and help support where we can, but it's just like, you have to invest some money to get there. So I think, Peter, it's that initial investment in the customer experience, and then thereafter to understand the benefit of outsourcing, so that those, ultimately customers can get a more objective viewpoint, so that they can actually move their business forward in the long term.
But it's really frightening in a sense that when you approach some of these organizations, that they actually don't have a CX budget in place already, and that's something that's an immediate obstacle for a CX partner that they have to overcome.
Way too many times. And I don't know with your experience, Peter, but it is frightening how often that is encountered. Now, I'll let you answer that question.
Well, no, I mean, honestly, it's something that you do hear about. But when it comes to you from somebody who's working in the CX space like yourself, and who's running an organization whose specialty it is to help drive better CX outcomes in a B2B environment, it actually hits home.
Yeah, it really does. And I mean, that's one of the most rewarding elements of our job. So at Icon, what do we get pleasure from? We honestly, genuinely get pleasure from supporting the business to business space and the sector. But, when we can help organizations understand that a proper, meaningful CX strategy is going to give great long-term customer value, great lifetime value, that loyalty leads into the fiscal gains for the company. And ultimately, it's about investing in building and strengthening relationships is key. The ROI doesn't take long to be realized. It's just that initial hurdle. But companies are getting far better at it now. And definitely with COVID. So COVID is, one of the, with all downsides, there's always opportunity. And I honestly can say, since COVID, more and more business-to-business organizations are recognizing the need to invest in customer experience. So we see this as changing over the forthcoming years to come. I think that will be a definite positive output as a result of the recent pandemic.
So, thinking about organizations that have a B2B requirement and that have understood the benefits of working with a CX partner, what do you find they look for when they're going out to try and engage with one or more outsourcers? What are the key elements that they want an outsourcer to be able to bring to the table to make sure that the partnership is going to be as robust as possible?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is referenceability. I mean, that's key, making sure that they are dealing with an outsourcer that's got a good pedigree in the business-to-business space. And we've recently conducted a roundtable, and the white paper that's come out as a result of that is the key thing that organizations are looking for is the right resource. So, the right highly skilled and experienced resource to match their customer base, but most importantly as well, tenure. Because this outsourcing customer experience within the B2B space is not a light undertaking. So it is a strategic investment from an organization. When that is undertaken, It's to make sure that when, this is a key integral ingredient and component for businesses. So when they've done that and, spend a lot of time and investment in onboarding their outsourcer, what they don't want is high churn of their customer experience team. So they're looking at pedigree, they're looking at referenceability, they're looking at the right resource, they're looking at tenure, are some of the key things. In addition, not enough, I don't believe at the moment, but culture. Culture is a facet that organizations look for, and I think will become more of a facet that organizations look for when outsourcing, and size. So also, when you're looking at this valuable element, to put it in an organization where this truly is going to be nurtured, it represents a good representation of that outsourcer's client portfolio. It's not going to get lost.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we know, don't we, Peter, that good customer experience starts with brilliant employee satisfaction. So we're seeing more and more clients now starting to probe more about how we as an organization are measuring our employee satisfaction, because again, I'm not stating anything that's rocket science, but we know that the better employees are engaged, the better they're valued, the better relationships. They'll go above and beyond to build great relationships with our clients, customers.
Those are all, I think, very important elements to consider for any enterprise when they're looking to try and engage with a BPO. And I think something that you touched on right at the very end in terms of that employee satisfaction and the culture seems to be becoming much more of a determinant. And, it's interesting, Helen, I published a blog recently talking about the need for diversity in the contact center and a diversity in the CX environment and social inclusion. All of these things, near as I can tell, whether it's B2C or B2B, are looking to be prioritized in a much bigger way in probably 2021 and beyond.
100%. And I think what it is, Peter, I think people sort of, when we look at our customers and we're speaking to our prospects, originally it was just like companies genuinely want and need to work with organizations that have proper living, breathing, diversity, inclusion. That was like a business principle we saw. The key turning point now is that I think our clients and our prospects are really understanding, which means that it was almost like a feature that's what you're dealing with. But now organizations are understanding, my gosh, it means that actually that organization is delivering better customer experience to our customers.
And we do know that when it comes to customer experience delivery, technology has become a much bigger part of the whole CX dynamic. And it's a part that I think is very exciting in many ways if you get it right. How do you get it right in terms of the right technologies or using the most appropriate technologies in a B2B environment? Are there any technologies or any solutions that you feel are more important than others that an organization should be looking to prioritize?
It's a great question. Icon really believes the starting point is understanding the customer base. So once we've got that, it's about infusing that feedback into the business and adjusting operations to better service accounts. And what can happen is everybody gets so excited about all the technology options and routes. You plow onto that route before actually stepping back and actually deploying technology that helps organizations better understand their customers. So, especially in the business-to-business environment, Icon's advice would be start off with technology that helps you better understand your customer base. Once you've got that, and there's plenty of CX technologies out there that will help clients, do a first survey, close the loop, assess what's going on, manage customer experience, because that's a big leap forward for business to business, the business to business space. Thereafter, then start to have a look at the technologies that are going to help support where we want to take that relationship to. And there's some really great, and if we look through, all the advice is yes, we need to make sure everything, all the options are incorporated properly. My other little bit of advice would be don't overcomplicate things straight away. Take it steady, and don't forget that we're speaking with businesses. All these other technologies will play a part for sure. I absolutely underline that and bold it. However, the traditional email and voice platforms, are still a predominant element of the business to business environment. So we've got this lovely business to consumer stuff that's doing all this great stuff. It is going to play a part, but don't get your head turned. Let's make sure we understand the customer with the technologies out there to do that. Thereafter, have a look at what we've got and have a look at when and how we integrate other technologies moving forward.
Okay, so Helen, let's take a little bit of a trip back in time here and think a little bit about what the B2B CX environment was like prior to the pandemic, how it changed during the course of the past 12 to 15 months, and how you see the B2B CX atmosphere moving forward in a post-vaccine period. I know there's a lot to digest in that question, but to get some perceptions, I think, in terms of where we've been and more importantly, where we're going from that angle of customer experience will be very helpful.
Yeah, thanks for that, Peter, because it is a really, really good question. And what we have witnessed thus far is we see more organizations seeing the value of investing in customer experience, which I guess really links back to that. I think our original talking point is what are some of the obstacles, and it's just getting organizations to invest in that. But we really do see now that organizations are beginning to wake up to the value of investing in customer experience. So the B2B space, as we've said, has been behind the curve when it comes to customer experience. And we genuinely see that organizations post-COVID, or as we're coming through COVID, have woken up. They're realizing the power that comes from investing, not just in customers, but employees as well. Because again, the point that I made earlier, great customer experience comes from great employee engagement and satisfaction as well. So we're seeing organizations really make sure that employees are valued, making sure that they're investing in customer experience. They've woken up for the need for a stronger customer experience. And we're starting to see more genuine commitment to the personalization of experiences with communications and unique circumstances, so that our teams that are supporting with either inside sales or account management, they're truly acting as advisors rather than the old-fashioned, salespeople. So if you look at before and after, it really is the role of an advisor as opposed to sort of a representative, a salesperson.
Great. Well, Helen Hickin, thank you so much. This has been an absolutely fascinating discussion on an angle, as I said before, that I don't think gets as much attention as it deserves in terms of the B2B community when it comes to customer experience. We look forward to having you on the CX Files, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.